Shalom, shalom, shalom. I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah, Kodash. Salutations to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Salutations and shalom to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace, salutations, right? And to the brothers, the Akim, out there spreading this truth like wildfire in all truthfulness and in all sincerity. And shalom to the rest of the hopeful elect out there. I hope this video is edifying. So basically, I received news, from Newswire on Twitter, aka X, that the U.S. Supreme Court asked to overturn what they call landmark same-sex marriage ruling, ABC. And let me get the article for that. I'm gonna get the article for it and show y'all. But basically, this might actually happen because Esau, Edom, he's dealing with basically what it is Esau, Edom is dealing with low declining birth rates. And this is the article on it. Supreme Court, and it's not because, hey, when you do it good, you do it unwillingly. You'll get a few wins, rare W's, out of this, because shit that should have never been legalized, that should have never been allowed. Some of that is being banned. But Supreme Court formally asked to overturn landmark same-sex marriage ruling. Kim Davis, a former clerk who refused, I remember her, quote-unquote gay couples, because the original meaning of the word gay was not to be a homosexual, but to be, or a sodomite. It was to be happy, which is why you have it in last names. Brought the appeal. 10 years after the Supreme Court extended marriage rights to same-sex couples nationwide, the justices this fall will consider for the first time whether to take up a case that explicitly asked them to overturn that decision. Kim Davis, the former Kentucky county clerk who was jailed for 6 days in 2015 after refusing to issue marriage licenses to a quote-unquote gay couple on religious grounds, is appealing a $10,000 jury verdict for emotional damages plus $260,000 for attorney's fees in a petition for writ of certiorari. Let me get that. It's a legal term originating from law language. Not surprising, this is Rome all over again. Meaning, quote-unquote, to be informed of. In the context of law, it refers to a writ or order from a higher court to a lower court, requiring the lower court to send up the record of a case for review. The process is most commonly associated with the U.S. Supreme Court's review of decisions from federal and state appellate courts. And basically, you heard it. Davis argues First Amendment protection for free exercise of religion immunizes her from personal liability for the denial of marriage licenses. And basically, we know that that homosexual shit, that sodomite shit, is going off, and it's against the scriptures. She's right. More fundamentally, she claims that the High Court's decision in Obergefell versus Hodges extending marriage rights for same-sex couples under the 14th Amendment's due process protections was quote-unquote egregiously wrong, which, we look at the Constitution, basically marriage is up to the states. Quote-unquote, so she's right. Quote-unquote, the mistake must be corrected, wrote Davis's attorney Matthew Staver in the petition. He called Justice Anthony Kennedy's majority opinion in Obergefell "quote unquote" legal fiction. This basically, when you look at that, I was linked to the so-called Jews as well. The JOOs. The petition appears to mark the first time since 2015 that the court has been, so basically the elites pushed it, through them. But the petition appears to mark the first time since 2015 that the court has been formally asked to overturn the landmark, calling it landmark marriage decision. Davis is seen as one of the only, basically changes a lot of shit, be remembered in history type shit. But Davis is seen as one of the only Americans currently with legal standing to bring a challenge to the precedent. Quote unquote, if there ever a precedent, just in case y'all don't know, that's a past event, action, or decision that serves in an example rule to be followed in similar situations, particularly in legal contexts. It's a prior instance that can guide future actions or decisions, especially in law, where it's known as stare decisis, more Latin. Stare decisis, stare decisis. Looks like that's probably how you pronounce it. The doctrine of stare decisis, quote unquote, to stand by things decided, is the principle of following precedent in legal decision making, setting a precedent. A court's decision can set a precedent for future cases, potentially impacting legal interpretations and practices. Overruling precedent. Courts can overrule prior precedents if they deem them incorrect or unworkable, though this is a significant step. Example, if a court rules that a specific action is illegal, that ruling becomes a precedent, and similar actions in the future may be judged similarly. In legal context, basically sums it up. A precedent is a prior judicial decision that serves as an authority for deciding later cases involving similar issues. But basically it's what it was, just in case you didn't know. But quote unquote, if there ever was a case of exceptional importance, David wrote, quote unquote, the first individual in the Republic's history who was jailed for following her religious convictions regarding the historic definition of marriage. This should be it, quote unquote. So, and I'm gonna keep reading. Lower courts have dismissed Davis's claim, and most legal experts consider her bid a long shot. A federal appeals court panel concluded earlier this year that the former clerk, quote unquote, cannot raise the First Amendment as a defense because she's being held liable for state action, which the First Amendment does not protect, quote unquote. But anyways, let me tell you why Esau Edom, might, and why they might pull this, why the Supreme Court might actually consider this case, and use it to basically strike down that ruling legalizing homo marriage and shit, because their birth rates are decreasing. We know that lifestyle, you gotta adopt a kid, or if it's two women, you gotta use in vitro fertilization, that lifestyle it's not a sexuality in reality, it's an abomination, and it doesn't produce life, only death. So basically, Obama was meant to be the president under which that would happen, because our people, and as a majority, especially Judah, looked up to Obama. And then you have all these celebrities promoting that lifestyle and shit, and then moved on to to the Transformers and shit. And basically that do as thou wilt shit was being pushed. It's been being pushed. And basically their people started to sip on that wine too. Basically their people started to sip on that wine, and really it was Esau's shit, but Esau keep it under the wraps. But they're starting to drink that wine of fornication, wrath of fornication that was given to all these nations, and that includes Edom. Their people are starting to sip on it, and be proud to be, burning bundle of sticks and shit, But basically, it has contributed to the lowering birth rates, and that's why Esau Edom suddenly gives a fuck, because before he didn't think this was a possibility, but now Esau Edom, the elites of Esau Edom, appears that they're signaling that they may do this, and what it will do is leave it up to the states. It will leave it up to the states to decide, if they want to, Davis's appeal to the Supreme Court comes as conservative opponents of what they call marriage rights, really not, for same-sex couples pursue a renewed campaign to reverse legal precedent and allow each state to set its own policy. At that time, Obergefell was decided in 2015. 35 states have statutory or constitutional bans on homo marriages, according to the National Conference of State Legislations. Only 8 states had enacted laws specifically allowing the unions. So, what's going to end up happening, which I think going to end up happening is these blue states are going to pass laws, especially if they pull this, and I think they might. These blue states are going to adopt they're going to pass laws basically saying, homo marriages are allowed here and shit, They're allowed here. They're gonna pass it, make sure it's like, even some of them might pass constitutional amendments, but at the same time, Republican states, red states, are gonna automatically ban it. Just like what happened when the Roe v. Wade ruling was overturned, because their people are starting to get affected by these abortion rates. Their women are starting to murder their unborn babies too. So, because Esau was being affected in that way, they did what they did in red states. It's not legal there for the most part, and different levels to the bans and the consequences for the punishments for that. Texas, it's pretty harsh, but rightfully so, that's murder. But Esau only do the right thing when it benefits him. Esau Edom only does the right thing when it benefits him. He's an unjust judge. He doesn't do the right thing when basically when it's not going to benefit him. That's Esau. So they may do this. So far in 2025, at least 9 states have either introduced legislation aimed at blocking new marriage licenses for the alphabet crowd, or passed resolutions for the rearranged alphabet crowd, or passed resolutions urging the Supreme Court to reverse Obergefell at the earliest opportunity, according to the advocacy group Lambda Legal. In June, the Southern Baptist Convention, the nation's largest Protestant so-called Christian denomination, overwhelmingly voted to make quote-unquote overturning of laws and court rulings, including Obergefell versus Hodges, that defy, who they call God's design for marriage and family, quote-unquote, a top priority. So basically, support for equal, quote-unquote, equal marriage, right? Quote-unquote rights softening, while a strong majority of Americans favor equal marriage rights, so which you gotta consider the source. Support appears to have softened in recent years, according to Gallup. 60% of Americans supported same-sex so-called marriages in 2015, rising to 70% support in 2025, but that level has plateaued, hasn't risen since 2020. Among Republican support has notably dipped over the past decade, down from 55% in 2021 to 41% this year, Gallup found. Davis's petition argues the issue of marriage should be treated the same way the court handled the issue of abortion in its 2022 decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. She zeroes in on Justice Clarence Thomas's concurrence in that case, in which he explicitly called for revisiting Obergefell. The justices, quote-unquote, should consider all this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, quote-unquote. Thomas wrote at the time, referring to the landmark's decisions dealing with a fundamental right to privacy, due process, and equal protection rights. Quote-unquote, it is hard to say where things will go, but this will be a long slog considering how popular same-sex marriage is now, quote-unquote, said Josh Blackman, a prominent conservative and constitutional scholar and professor at South Texas College of Law. Blackman predicts many members of the Supreme Court's conservative majority would want prospective challenges to Obergefell to percolate in lower courts before revisiting the debate. The court is expected to formally consider Davis's petition this fall during a private and they may do this, but I think there's a chance that they're going to do it because of the reasons that I brought up. Now they try and downplay it later on in the article. But the court is expected to formally consider Davis's petition this fall during a private conference when the justices discuss which cases to add to their docket. If the case is accepted, it will likely be scheduled for oral argument late spring and decided by the end of June 2026. The court could also decline the case, allowing a lower court ruling to stand and avoid entirely the request to revisit Obergefell. Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett seem widely uninterested. Maybe Justice Neil Gorsuch too, said Sarah Isgur of ABC News. So they're saying if the ruling could be overturned at some point, it would not invalidate marriages. Already performed. New experts have pointed out the 2022 Respect for Marriage Act requires the federal government and all states to recognize legal marriage as the same sex and everything. they're including it with interracial couples. That's how they also justify reform in the state, even if there's a future change in the laws. Davis first appealed the Supreme Court in 2019, seeking to have the damages suit against her tossed out, but her petition was rejected. Conservative Justices Thomas and Samuel Alito concurred with the decision at the time. The petition, quote unquote, the petition implicates important questions about the scope of our decision in Obergefell, but it does not cleanly present the quote unquote Thomas wrote in the statement. But Esau could do this, and it would be because it would be because of the declining birth rates and shit. Be to save their own ass. Basically Esau, when he do it good, he do it unlovingly. He doth good. Ecclesiasticus 14:7. And if he doth good, he doth it unwillingly, and at the last he will declare his wickedness. Now Esau, he's only doing it to save his own ass. So it's unwillingly. But Esau could have his way all the way. He would continue that. But basically, it goes into that whole concept of him being an unjust judge too. It's worded different, that's why. Try this. Trying to look for that parable. The unjust judge. Can't find it. It's probably rude though. God. Luke 18:2, saying there was in the city a judge which feared not Yahweh, neither regarded man. Verse 3, and there was a widow, it was capital J. And there was a widow, capital I, there was no J's back then. And there was a widow in that city, and she came to him, saying, Avenge me of mine adversary. Verse 4, and he would not for a while. But afterward he said within himself, Though I fear not Yahweh, nor regard man. Verse 5, Yet, because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. Verse 6, and Yahweh said, Hear what the unjust judge saith. So basically, it's because the reason why they might do this shit is because we didn't think that people didn't think that they was gonna overturn Roe v. Wade, and they did it. But so same shit, Esau might do that, save his own ass. Obadiah 1 and 2, Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. But also, that's double meaning. But they're basically, Esau is basically the real minority, if you will. Jeremiah 49 and 15. For lo, I will make thee small among the heathen and despised among men. Again, double meaning to that. Both small and despised. But basically, Esau Edom, he's trying to save his declining birth rates. And so he may do that. While at the same time going after Jake. At the same time. Specifically right now, you northern tribes, but with Trump moving on DC, starting to go after these southern tribes like that too. House of Judah, because we know DC is a lot of Judites there. Then they're talking about then Trump's talking about specifically taking over New York, Chicago. Next could probably be LA. New Orleans, Houston, Dallas, Cincinnati, Cleveland, all that. Basically, all these cities. Memphis, all these cities where the tribes are at, At the same time, it's a two-pronged approach. Esau's doing that. He's also setting up plays to increase the so-called white population. Because Esau, he basically, these devils think they can reverse prophecy by do away with prophecy by biblical prophecy of them being small among the heathen. They don't reverse that and crack down, basically get rid of our people. And that's they doing both, trying to increase their population and get rid of get rid of Jake. And the ancient Egyptians tried to do the same shit. You know? Because Jake was increasing. You know, our population was increasing, and it was a threat to those heathens. Exodus 1:7, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Jake became the majority. Verse 8, now there arose up a new king. There's a whole history, like basically Joseph died and all his brethren and all that generation. Basically Jake came into a rulership position. There's so much of them that they came into a rulership position. When you look into the Hyksos, you know, and the Hyksos, pharaohs, those were Jake's, man. But verse 7, and the children, and Esau knows our history. You know, and then also you have the Holy Roman Empire, that was Jake. And Byzantine, meaning backward empire, that was Jake, was Israelites. You know, there's even a whole book on it. It's prophecies, Revelation 20, and there's even a whole book on that, you know, the medieval empire of the Israelites. You know, the Dark Ages is also called that because of that too. Exodus 1:7, and the children of Israel were, because Esau was down and out and Jacob was up and up, you know. Verse 7, and the children, the serpent had to go more into that. Basically, you know, Esau, Edom, you know, had to be restrained so he don't deceive all the nations. And that happened for that 1,000 year period. And basically, when you look at the Byzantine Empire, for example, in that period, it was about a period of 1,000 years. And you know, so that was the first 1,000 years. It's twofold. You know, second one that's coming is the kingdom. You know, Esau will have to serve slavery and pay for what he did, build up our kingdom and pay for what he did, and the heathens too pay for what they did to our people. This time in the rulership of the elect. The first 1,000 years, you know, was give or take, was under really 2/3, you know. At the same time, Jake was falling away. But anyways, yeah. Verse 7, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. You know, basically, if you will, the dark ages of Egypt. Verse 8, now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Basically, the Hamites overthrew us. Then there arose up a new king over Egypt. Hey, think of it as the Egyptian Renaissance. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Basically, you know, you have to think like Joseph, verse 6 and 7, after Joseph died and all his brethren and all that generation, you know, of him. And then after that, verse 7, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled. You have to think about it. We're princes of the power, you know. That's what Yasharallah means. Yasharallah, the Hebrew word for Israel. Israel is an anglicized version. He's a prince of power, you know. You have to think Jake took over. They were the so-called Hyksos, man. Shepherd kings. And then after that, you know, the ancient Egyptian Hamite Renaissance. Verse 8, now there arose up, which means rebirth. Come on. None new under the sun. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Verse 9, and he said unto his people, and this is how this places Egypt all over again. Verse 9, and he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Verse 10, bro, Esau copied the ancient Egyptians playbook. Verse 10, come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. I'm going to read on down, not just these verses. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Verse 11, therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. So they tried to make our life hell. What happened after the Renaissance and during the Renaissance period? Slavery of our people. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. You know, hey, Jake built them pyramids. Verse 12, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. You know, Jake wasn't fazed by that. Verse 13, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. Verse 14, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. Sounds like hardcore slavery to me. Verse 15, and the king of Egypt spake, you know, to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of other Puah. Verse 16, and he said, Verse 16, and he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew woman, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill them, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live. And basically, because the son, the man, you know, the male is what keeps the nation running, you know, what keeps the nation going. You know, the man has the seed. So they wanted to kill off, you know, Jake and just let Eve live, so they could get with Eve and put it into Yasharallah. And basically, that was abortion, ancient Egyptian style, basically. And Planned Parenthood promoted that for our people, pushed that on our people. Started off as the American Birth Control League, then you had Planned Parenthood clinics on basically all over the hoods and shit. Still, you know, in states where that's legal, that's where it's at. Verse 17, but the midwives feared Yahweh and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. Saved the men children alive. You know, back then, Eve was, you know, not as wicked. You know, she actually feared the Most High Power Yahweh. Verse 18, and the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have ye done this thing and have saved the men children alive? And of course they made up an excuse, but it's also true at the same time. Verse 19, and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and are delivered ere the midwives come into unto them. You know, and it's actually true, but it was also being used as an excuse. Verse 20, therefore the Most High power Yahweh dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. Verse 21, and it came to pass, because the midwives feared Yahweh, that he made them houses. Verse 22, and Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So that was basically the ancient Egyptians coming down with great wrath. And basically our people waking up back to the knowledge, in some form or way, even though not all the way, only the elect will. And basically, it's actually backfiring. The abortion actually backfiring on them, because their women are starting to go and get abortions and shit. That trap that they set for our people, they're falling into it, basically. And basically that homosexual shit was also pushed on our people, so our people basically would be proud to be homos, and basically they pushed that lifestyle, and instead of basically it would reduce reproduction. It was ultimately a method of population control, as was the transformer movement. It was also that as well, because that will basically that gender therapy, gender confirming therapy or whatever, especially when given to kids, basically it makes, like they've been pushing, quote unquote, protect transformer kids, right? Basically makes them infertile. And so it was another form of that. They did it in they basically made eugenics liberal, but their own nation started to embrace that as well. Esau ain't right anyways, and Jake made it cool. So their own nation started to embrace that, and especially with these celebrities making it cool and shit. Their own nation started to, Jake puts flavor into everything. Jake brings out the flavor in everything, That's, Jake is the salt of the earth. I wish I called our people the salt of the earth. And what does salt do to food? It brings out flavor. So, even that was made cool. And then you have the Eve rappers rapping about abortions and shit, making it cool and shit. And that was meant as a snare for our people to fall. But their people have fell in that snare as well. And for a while they tolerated it. It's worth it to get rid of Jake. But it's basically reduced the birth rates even more. And they already, ain't as lively as Jake, right? Ain't as fruitful as Jake. And they already ain't as lively and fruitful as Jake. So that affected them even more. And so 2022, they overturned Roe v. Wade, allowing states to ban abortion. And then in 2025, 26, if Babylon is still around, I could see them. I could see them maybe pulling that. You know, it's a real possibility because Esau's declining birth rates. You know, but hey, that will also backfire because the Jakes in these red states, you know that. Well, Jake is just gonna Jake that's like that. You know, they're gonna leave these red states and go to the blue states pretty much, and even Edomites that are don't want to give up that lifestyle and heathens that don't want to do it, they're gonna eventually make their way to the blue states, and the basically the red states is gonna be where you can't do that shit. But it could be, it could happen. It could happen. Esau might pull that, you know. But it doesn't mean that homo marriage is banned nationwide. It means that it's only banned in red states, basically. But you know, with that, I want to give all praises to, I hope this video was edifying. I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah, Kodash. Double honors to, well, salutations to the apostles and elders of GMS, and shalom to them as well. And salutations and shalom to the Akim out there spreading this truth like wildfire in all truthfulness and in all sincerity. And shalom to the rest of the hopeful elect out there. Abba Babal, that to Babylon. Abba Adawamium, that to these Edomites. Abba Gawayim, that to these other nations. Abba Hayab Nawa, death to our enemies. And then what? Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai will bring it in due time. Shalom, and that time is coming soon. Shalom, stay strong. Abba Babal, Wa Yashar Allah forever. Shalom. I'm almost out of here. Stay. Shalom.